Hello and welcome to our latest episode of the Kith and Kin podcast, Stories from the Hospitality Industry. And I am really happy to be welcoming Jackie here to tell us all about the ups and downs that have brought her to where she is and what makes the hospitality industry so special. So hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for coming to join me with this conversation. And as usual, can we just start with an introduction to who you are and what you do, please?
Hi, Cassie. Thanks so much for inviting me, and I hope I've got something of interest to say. So I'm Jackie Moody McNamara, and I currently am founder of a sort of bespoke learning and development business called Be Brilliant. And I'm in the latter stages of my career, based on having a career in hospitality and working from bar to boardroom would be my background, which I'm sure will explain. So I
Fantastic.
focus a lot on coaching, mentoring, working with individuals and sort of executive teams is where I'm lucky to spend my time, both in hospitality and other sectors, manufacturing and retail and different sectors as well at the moment. So.
Fantastic. But I know you have a special place in your heart for hospitality. So let's wind it right back. And as you say, bar to boardroom, where did it all start? Because I know this is a really exciting story here.
So both my parents came to England from Ireland when they were teenagers, and they worked their socks off, Irish immigrants here, and they ended up working part-time in a pub as one of their second incomes that they had. And then they both became licensees in Birmingham. You might be able to hear my accent, even though I left it like.
No.
Right, so yeah, you're a Brummie. I am a Brummie, yes. They landed in Birmingham and lived with lots of other immigrants, different nationalities in Birmingham. And then one day someone said to them, "Oh, we think you could run a pub. Would you like to run a pub?" And so at the age of about probably 4, so I really don't remember living in a house.
Yeah.
And up until the
Wow.
age of probably about 22, lived in pubs then for all of that time.
That because I mean I owned a pub and brought my kids up in a pub briefly, and it's quite an experience living in a pub. I mean, how did you find it growing up in that environment?
I was the youngest of 4, and there was a gap of 8 years between us, so I was the spoilt one in the family. I absolutely loved it. Really, I suppose hospitality started prior to that. Mum and Dad had a house they'd bought, and they used to rent out rooms. So even before the
Yes.
pubs, hospitality was in, and it was
Yeah.
providing places. Particularly, we had Irish men came and were working and sending money home. So Mum looked after them in our home, and we shared our home with them and cooked and
Nice.
cleaned and done all that sort of thing for them. So I loved it, and I think it's probably where my confidence came from, being with customers. And it was very different to now. It was very community driven. We knew everybody. It was very safe. The police weren't shooing the children out late at night. And my father often tells a lovely story of where I used to sleep on the pool table at night watching the television. Unusually, so I absolutely loved being in pubs, and it's part of my success story, and I think giving me the confidence to sort of talk to people, and I guess even do the work I'm doing today.
It sounds like actually what your parents were doing was creating this home for people before owning a pub, but actually within the pub as well, and it was that whole idea of sharing your home and a community being part of that.
And unfortunately, my home now feels a bit like a pub if you walk into my garage, with all the trappings of having social events and having people around. But yeah, they were
Yeah.
very interesting. They were very different characters, actually, my parents, but both very much homemakers and really love people, looking after people. And although we didn't have plush beginnings where we started, I think they appreciated the privilege they had, living above a pub, having their own home above the pub,
Yeah.
and being able to extend the hospital, the warmth, we used to have in the old days outdoors. I don't know if you remember those. And you know, when it was cold and the homeless was outside, they were allowed to sleep in our outdoor where it was warm. You know, that was the degree
Yeah,
of, and we did
yeah,
lots of charity work in the pubs that we had too, and still sponsored blind dogs, guide dogs for the blind, and it was literally an extension. Um, you know, my dad's pubs never did food, but he would do big pots of stew, and then he would share. Like I'd come home with no food left because everyone
yeah.
else in the pub had eaten. I think. Uh, And on Christmas Day, we'd have the homeless have Christmas dinner with us in our pub in Handsworth in Ozell. So I lived in some interesting places where there were riots. And I remember my sister having a brand new Mini. She was so proud, you know, very young, just able to drive. And
Yeah.
my dad offered her to drop one of the homeless people off to where he would be sleeping for the night. And she was totally mortified. So I guess that's what family life was like. So it was great. But unfortunately, actually, at the age of 6, both my parents found it too much having a pub together. And on one hand, it was unfortunate they divorced, and on the other hand, it was fortunate for me because then I had 2 pubs to live in. So
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
my story.
Wow.
And where I get a lot of what I do now and the work I'm very passionate about, which I know we'll talk about, which is women progressing. What that been able to happen then was Mum was very successful in her own right and not a partner and a wife in a business, and dad was able sort of to do the same. So I had a very unconventional upbringing of Catholic family, parents, divorced. That was unusual.
Yeah, yeah.
But then also with a mother who was very successful in her career too. So
Yeah. And it sounds like everyone's been very driven by the purpose of sort of serving and that opportunity to be able to contribute beyond yourself to others.
oh yeah, we used to run we had function rooms, and so we participate in people's weddings, christenings of their family. And you know, I know now we had an event just last week, and organising that and all the little details, you know, the lighting, the flowers, the food, how it would feel for people when they arrive, because we wanted it to be really special for them. I learned all of that back then in,
Yeah,
you know, when
yeah,
people came and spend their earnings with us, um, they were giving something up, I suppose, and it was our job to ensure that they had the best experience, enjoyed it, and felt that community, particularly around them, because they were very all community-driven pubs that we were in, and you know, everyone looked out for each other. They were in all in salubrious areas. They were later. We progressed from Handsworth, Heath to Solihull and Sutton Coldfield, but the dynamic is still the same of, you know, sort of being in a community. And I guess over time, I've taken working with the team, you know, our teams that would work in the pubs and looking after them as if they were family members, you know, really looking out for them. And they had their weddings with us and what have you. So it always felt like a privilege, a bit like the work I do today. It felt like a
yeah, yeah,
privilege to be part of
yeah.
someone else's life.
I know how amazing that to have this opportunity to be driven by that purpose of contributing. So I imagine living in a pub from the age of 4 that you were part of the staff from quite an early age as well. So you're working in those environments.
And no one was more of a stickler on standards than my mother. So again, it was very like detail and standards, and so I started obviously working for free for a lot of time
Yeah,
when I
yeah,
was young and
yeah.
enjoying that.
I try.
I guess you
I
just
tried to get my. That's what I'm saying. I tried to get my kids to do that. They weren't having any of it.
yeah, they're probably a bit more switched on today maybe than we were then. Got a bit of pocket money, but yeah, I mean, I started off glass collecting, and to be fair, I left school at 17 with one GCS, a couple of GCSEs and an O level. We had O levels then, because I thought I was joining the military. We had lots of police coming after hours in our pub, and I thought,
Yes,
oh, I'm going to
yes.
join the police military. That sounds great. And then I went for a weekend, and they started telling me what to do, which I didn't like very much. Then realised I didn't want to be a military policewoman. Why would I do that?
Yeah,
And I hadn't really thought of anything else at school. And then literally, you know, I'd worked at mum's behind the bar and dad's pubs. And then mum went on holiday. and the relief manager the day before said he couldn't come. And then at 18, in dire straits as plan B, the area manager said, do you think you could run the pub for us while your mum's on holiday? I went, yes.
Yeah, of course I can.
I live upstairs. I know how it runs. Yeah, I'll give it a
Yeah,
shot. And that was really the
yeah,
beginning of a career, I suppose, really for me personally, then in
yeah.
hospitality, having fallen into it, I suppose, really.
Well, yeah, but it does almost sound inevitable, though. I mean, given that you knew the job so well, but also that you really valued all of what a pub could provide for people, and actually you're driven in that direction.
Yeah, so I mean, it was the beginning of a career. I did relief management for about 3 years. What was really interesting, and actually, I can sort of understand why I like doing what I do now. So, I now work with lots of different businesses and lots of different people. In those formative years, I would do relief and go to lots of different pubs and run them. So, I actually learnt a lot rather than just being in our own pub, of walking
Yes.
into somewhere and having to pick something up from scratch, very quickly understand how it operates. And it may only be for 2 weeks. But I always felt when I came away, I'd added a bit of something different. My mum talks about, even, she tells my friends when she meet, I remember when Jackie came home from one of her reliefs with the curtains from the pub, and we washed them because they weren't clean. And so I used to have to do all this stuff. So she loves telling that tale of going off and, I guess, putting your own little stamp on. Is this my standard? Is this how I've been taught to
Yeah.
run the business and
Yeah.
look after people and what have you? Um, so I think that variety of in different businesses always appealed to me, and actually being happy to be put on the spot and have to pick things up sort of quickly. And I think that informed a lot of probably what happened then throughout my career. Of opportunities arose and I said yes, and followed. There was no big plan.
No.
Bit like when I said I'm not joining the army, didn't have a plan B.
So, but I imagine doing those sort of relief management things, actually, obviously picking up sort of, how a business operates, and being able to think, but it's also that quick rapport with people, having to get people to work with you quickly, and therefore be able to understand them and read them and know what their motivations and needs are, so that you're not, because there's that risk, isn't it, when you come in, particularly if you're coming in sort of relief management, that you're coming in briefly, that you could just sort of come in and stamp your feet and say, right, we're doing like this, and just upset everybody. But I can tell you weren't that kind of relief manager.
Well, actually, what you felt going in was this was someone else's home. I was in someone else's home. They lived upstairs. I think it's quite different today. Pubs are quite different,
Yeah.
unless you get the more, I think, tenanted and lease type businesses. A lot of people don't live upstairs, but I was being entrusted to go into someone's home, maybe stay there as well, and sleep there if I wasn't able to go home at night. It was their business, and it was the company's business too. It was a managed operation, so I felt responsibility to them. But it made you quite adaptable. There were things that maybe I didn't quite like, but I might have done because it was their process or their way. So maybe
Yeah.
a little bit more
Yeah.
accepting. But I also wanted to make a good impression. You wanted to leave there that they wanted you back.
Yeah.
That the managers were happy for you to come back because you did a good job for them, which made the area manager's job easy because he had me running, 6, doing a variety of reliefs, I suppose, really. So it taught me a lot about people, and not everyone was as receptive to have a young 20-odd-year-old female coming into
I
their
bet.
business to run their business for them. Some were more accepting, and then they realised they did quite a good job. They were happy to have me back, and the standards were
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
type thing.
Yeah.
And I guess it's how youngsters now. My youngest has spent some time in hospitality. There isn't really anywhere else that you can quite connect in, and learn interpersonal skills, speaking to people, having empathy, and what have you, and working hard also, along the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a great career for younger people now, to help them, whatever career they go into, sort of longer term.
Absolutely, and it's quite a common theme when I'm talking to people on this podcast, which is people that start in the industry young, and the that learning curve, that really early, how quickly you can learn some really key important skills, whether you go on to use them in the industry or not, or whether you go on then to apply them elsewhere. It's just there isn't another industry that does it, that you can get those skills in quite the same way, and that can suit your personality, because it suits almost everyone. There's a little niche for everybody in this industry, isn't there?
Yeah. It's a very funny. I describe my career journey as ignorance is bliss. And I was in the male dominated sector for, well, all of my career, but never realised I was the only female,
Yeah.
which sounds a bit
Yeah.
bonkers. I didn't behave as I was the only female. And actually, a lot of the work I do now is around supporting particularly senior women and those advancing their sort of career, as to how to show up, confidently, own it, make an impact, and nearly forget you might be the only female there, but just expect that you're there for a reason and you've got that position because you've earned it, type thing. But it wasn't really till I got to the executive level I found that I felt different because of how I was treated. And actually, I never felt it all the way up. I went from behind the bar, running pubs, I went into training, and I applied for my first pub. They wouldn't give me one because I was single. And having done all the years of relief management, I thought, well, I could run this with my eyes closed, frankly. If you won't give me a pub, then I'll resign, with what I did. And then about 3 weeks later, the head of training turned up and said, we've heard you're resigning and we'd quite like to keep you in the business. Would you like a job in training? And I went, what's the salary? Do I get a car?
Yeah.
Oh, go on then, okay. As if I was doing them a favour. Now I look back going, oh, God, did I do that? And then I went on to be an area manager and head of investment and sort of recruitment, and then to ops director by the age of 32, having not been a graduate and felt that because there were lots of graduates in the business. I was probably never quite as good as they were, that sort of feeling. But actually, up until that point, I never sort of felt any different to anybody else. And one of my sayings when I met my husband was, expect the unexpected, the best is yet to come. So I'm a glass half full type of person.
Yeah,
And if
absolutely.
things aren't changing, I'll help them change.
So going back to when you refused your own pub, was that because you were single female, or was it because it was single female? It was, so single men were able to have a pub, but a single female wasn't, was kind of their attitude.
Well, funny enough, both my parents obviously had their own pubs, and my mum was a single female, but
Yeah.
she was very rare.
Yeah.
So I think generally, to be fair, they wanted couples.
Yeah.
Because at the time they used to pay the women 16 hours a week, sort of honorarium.
Yeah.
All the work they did, they were underpaid, undervalued, and the
Yeah.
male got the full salary. Yeah, that's how it was when my mum was, had her own pub. So actually, I always thought we had a bit of a privilege that when mum and dad did divorce, they both had their own businesses, and mum didn't have to work for 16 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We had a financial privilege, and we lived above pubs that lots of my friends didn't have. And I do look back and recognise, and actually the privilege of being in the business and having doors opened, and being part of that business, that people knew me because I was Mary's daughter, because she was successful. So I can see how, when I look at career progression for people now, generally, if you're in the know or you've got connections, that's very useful to have.
Yes. Yes, it is. I mean, the reason I was asking is because I opened my own place when I was 23, and I remember so clearly, and like you, I hadn't really noticed that there were no other women doing this. I just hadn't noticed. And then I opened this place, and I was just suddenly surrounded by all these men, and and I remember being asked, well, you're a woman on your own. How are you going to do it? How are you going to literally, how are you going to manage? And I was just sort of so confused by the question. I was like, well, what do you mean? Why would I not be able to when they can? And I did, it's only sort of reflection on that. I mean, I remember thinking it at the time, but it wasn't until much later then I turned around and said, actually, where are the women? Why is no one else doing this? And so yeah, so I was just very interested in those barriers, because for me it was slightly different, but I'm very aware that the barriers existed and do exist. And in my case, you know, I got through it by opening my own place, but actually, you know, financially now that's almost impossible for a woman to do on, or anyone to do on their own these days. So yeah, so it's just interested in that sort of angle.
Quite risky now to do it too at the you know, with everything that's going on with it. But yeah, it is interesting. And actually, I was coaching someone only the other day, and she's the only woman in the senior leadership team. I actually asked her to disconnect from seeing herself as being female.
Yeah, yeah,
In terms
yeah,
of, she actually was not serving her well. It was making her already think that I'm different and I'm set back. And it was more about saying, well, let's think about your strengths and what you bring, and let's reframe some of that. And actually, she got it. It's totally made me think, because in it, you're already thinking, I'm a woman. You can talk yourself into something. So it's like, well, let's
I
think
don't
about
belong
it.
here. Yeah, yeah. If I'm the only
So,
one, then I must not belong here. You know, that's quite
and
powerful, isn't
also,
it? To
you
keep
can use, to be fair, to your advantage.
yeah,
You know, so
yeah,
being an outlier, being a bit different, can be very useful.
yeah.
And yeah, part of a lot of what I do in my work now, and I guess I've learned through all my experiences is, and at different points of my career, is sometimes you have to just step back and look at the bigger picture of what's going on. And it's easy sometimes, particularly when you're emotional or upset about something that's happened and you feel it's unfair, you react to things very quickly, and it's the emotion that's showing, as opposed to actually very physically stepping back, looking at the bigger picture, and realizing most people don't do things with bad intent. Sometimes they're incompetent,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes they've just had your experience and they don't understand. And I think it's one of my probably key learnings, if I look back, of not taking things personally, because generally they're not personal to you. And if you can reframe
People
that,
are
it
just
makes a difference.
Most people are just trying their best, aren't they? And just getting through in the same way that you are. They're just, you know, most people are just muddling through and potentially say the wrong things or haven't thought it through properly, because you're not the priority in their thoughts. You know, that's just the reality, isn't it? So
But
you
you're
end up,
different. Sorry, go on.
no. So I was just saying, so you're getting to boardroom level, you know, in your movement. So where have we got to now in your
Oh,
story?
so I was sort of early 30s. I was running an estate of 500 tenanted and leased pubs. No
Wow.
one was more surprised than me that I was doing. And funny, I was just with an old colleague from that era yesterday in the car chatting, and I said, you know, I absolutely love. I mean, I really love that time of my career. That every 3 years I moved jobs and opportunity, but I was in a big business that had lots of opportunities. I think that's,
Yeah,
and I talk to my
yeah.
girls now, saying, I think about where you're going to work. And then and also I had a family, so then I had about 4 years where I'd got the big job, moved house, relocated, and in a 4 year period I fell in love and got married very quickly in 8 months. They were very shocked at work. They'd never seen anybody male, a partner. And then I got married, had my first daughter again while I was in this first director position, and my father died very suddenly, and he was one of 13. We're a very big Irish sort of family. And then
Oh,
having decided that we wouldn't wait for baby number two, we'd have baby number two. And so I lost dad in the March, and then by the December, I'd lost the baby at 22
oh,
weeks.
yeah.
And then a year later, had another baby. And all that was in my first tenure of running this estate of 500 pubs. So it taught me how resilient. So again, the ups and the downs, you know, that I
Yeah,
often say to
yeah,
people, when you get a down, it's a bit crap at the time, but generally an up. I don't know if you've experienced an up
That's
comes
coming.
from
Yeah,
that. It propels you
yeah,
and what have you.
yeah, yeah,
That was a interesting 4 years, I would say.
yeah. Yeah, but you're right about ups and downs, aren't you? That and I think that comes with, you know, experience. I was going to say rather than age, but that as you experience life, you know that as terrible as the downs can be, that they pass and something else happens. It's not forever, as tough as it may be. So what happened next? Where are you now? So you're
So,
managing.
so actually, when I returned to work after Emily, my second daughter, then I decided I didn't want to work full time. So I came back to the business and I really want to come back. I was at Punch Pub Company at the time. I lived 15 minutes from there. And fortunately, they found me a new role within the business at exec level on a project driving efficiency out of the business. It worked perfectly for me. We took nearly 7 million costs out of the business, which was amazing. And there was an opportunity to go into a new role, and they offered me redundancy. And after 21 years service and a 5-year-old, 6-year-old at home, I just made the decision then. I came home, I lay on the grass, looked up to the sky with the two girls and thought, actually, I'm taking the redundancy. I'm going to take that money and and I had 2 years off,
Wow.
which having worked
Yeah.
full time forever, but I kept busy and I loved it. But I then got bored and then came back.
Well, but isn't it nice though I mean, because you put in all of that hard work, so that 2 years off sounds like it's just a luxury, but it was well deserved 2 years. But yeah, absolutely. But that
Yeah.
opportunity to just go, to sort of have that reset and then be able to come back because you want to, and I presume do something that you really want to do.
Well, when I came back, I had lots of lovely things that I did with the children. When I came back, one of the things and I talk a lot with Women's Day about this professional identity. I didn't work for the big company anymore, and I didn't have the big job title. And coming back in, actually, I found it very difficult to get, which was very difficult, a job in hospitality.
Yeah, yeah.
So I ended up, I didn't get a job in hospitality, and I went into welfare to work and took a pay cut from what I'd been earning. And worked there for 3 years on a project within, but that was again great. I have a go. I liked the business and what it was about. So that led me to go into another couple of different sectors. I went into domiciliary care as a franchise director. Worked for someone who's been area manager for me. He was CEO, so that was interesting. And he said, come and join me and help me sort this company out. So again, you never know where the connections are going to come or who you're going to meet.
I love that. I've worked with people who were members of my staff, and it is so funny when people say, "Well, how do you know this person?" I go, "Oh, they used to work for me," and they just go, "Oh, like, what?
You
This
never
person
told
used to
them
work for
that.
you?" Yeah.
Funny, you never told them that. But I took it as did you take it as a huge compliment that, oh my God, I led this person and now
Yeah,
they actually want me
yeah,
to go and work for them?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do. And when I see all of the people, because well, I mean, I've been in a position where I've been an employer for 25 years. I mean, and it's in hospitality. So in 25 years, you employ thousands of people. So when you see them go off and do these amazing things, because quite often they're quite young when they work with you, and then they
Yeah.
go off and do these absolutely amazing things, sometimes in the industry, sometimes, doing something completely different, but they're taking the skills that they've learned with you and they're doing, you know, changing the world around the world. It's amazing. And you just go, oh yeah, I don't go, I did that because they did that. But, you just go,
Do you feel like their mother?
yeah, I do. I do. That's exactly how I feel. Yes.
Oh God, I'm so proud.
Yeah, it's lovely. I love it.
Rewarding, isn't it? Genuinely, and I guess the young people are our future now as well, aren't they? We need people. When I look at the caliber when I was younger, an area manager, the caliber of and capability of people was fabulous, you know. And so
Yeah.
where's that future talent coming from and growing to? And
Yeah.
you know, I enjoy now working with those in the early parts of their career too, as well as the sort of
Yeah.
senior women. And I guess nearly helping them with the things we learned and discovered. You'll be the same things you discovered with your own business, and all those people that you employed too. That if you can help them with some of those insights, and they'll have to have their own learning, but I think it's just giving them the confidence to go, it's okay, and not everything will work, you know, and
No, absolutely.
being
Absolutely.
true self.
No, yeah. And I used to love being able to do that, to be able to uh, be allowing people to develop in their own way and allow them to take the risks, to make the mistakes, knowing full, with, I guess it's like, I don't know, I've never done it, but teaching someone to learn to drive, not actually, that's a bad example because then you go crash the car, but you know what I mean? That you've got control, but they're doing it themselves. And it's just, I just think it's magical. And I think it's something that you forget to as an employer, you forget to remember that contribution. You're not just making a difference to your customers and to your community, you are making a difference to the people that work with you as well. And you forget that sometimes.
It's like parenting, isn't it? You know, it's your job is
Yeah.
to equip someone and empower them to have the confidence and the skills to then be able to watch from the sidelines and be there if that little look back, you know, as you had kids growing up, is mum still there type thing. That, you know, our job is to help them flourish and be independent and live their life the way they choose to do that. So I do often look at, I get messages, you know, little text messages of women I've coached, and even yesterday, I had a message saying, "Oh, I had the confidence to walk into a room that I never thought I'd be able to do that." And it's all those then
Yeah.
little wins
Yeah.
that happen that build,
Yeah.
I guess, momentum. And as I say, one small change changes everything if they're able to do that, doesn't it? So
Absolutely. So, yeah. So sorry. So where I've just lost track entirely because I get so distracted with the wonderful stories that we're telling. But we need to get, where are we now in your career
so
with your
I
career path? Sorry.
I went into different sectors, and then eventually I did come back into pubs, and I had another sort of 12 months leading a business that wasn't pub led, but they'd acquired pubs and helping them with
Right.
their
Yeah.
strategy and developing their strategy. And to be fair, what happened then was I just decided that, God, it's about time I did my own thing. A few businesses I'd worked with, I didn't align with their values very much. So there were quite a few times I resigned from the odd
Yeah.
post, because I just thought, I've got control here and I can make a choice, and I'm going to make a choice for me and my family. It's the right sort of thing to do. And then 6 years ago, so that will bring us more up to today, I again was job hunting, and then a few people asked for some help around coaching, but I wasn't a trained coach, and then thought, I'm going to go and train to be a coach, and then realised I was an accidental coach, and then I got qualified and realised really how, a bit like running a pub, when I went on the training courses and they trained me how to do it, I went, oh my God, I didn't do it that way. It worked okay, but this is better, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I qualified as a coach 6 years ago. I set up and founded Brilliant Women, a local group of professional women like me to help me because I was lonely again, not being in a big corporate, not having that professional identity. And on the back of that, I'm, I guess, running the business I have now, which is working with executive teams and coaching, mentoring. I do a lot of work around, I love the future and problem solving and strategy. So I do a lot of work with all my clients on helping them look at where they're going in the future and
Yeah.
how I can help them. I'm called Nanny McPhee by lots of people. I'm
Love the
there
name.
when you need me and I'm gone when you don't. I don't want to be a permanent fixture. I like working a
Right.
bit like relief
Right.
manager with all these different
Yeah.
businesses. Um,
Yeah.
and actually what I find with them is they don't realise how good they are and when they're where they're really great and their strengths are,
Yeah.
business and people. And they're afraid to address the pressing matters that are in front of them. So what I sort of do now is help them do that, and it's mainly strategy and behavioural work that I spend my time working on. And And I'm very, very proud of the work I do with the with females and professional women and bespoke programs that I put together for them. And that is probably my biggest joy, apart from my two girls,
Yeah. Yeah.
is doing
Yeah.
making a difference.
And typically, who do you work with?
I would say SMEs in terms of business sizes, where they can't afford someone full time, and now I tend to do some retained work with them in terms of all the behavioural work and team dynamics. So I've done a lot of that within the pub sector, but also within manufacturing. I go and do a little bit of coaching work, and then they go, "Oh, we like you, and you're quite grounded, aren't you? And not a bit highfalutin, and but you get stuck in." And actually, I spend a lot of time doing discovery work on really understanding who the business is or the people, what they're about. And then I feel then I've got a good relationship to be trusted to then help them shape sort of what they want to do going forward. Lots of senior executive professional women, sort of heads of departments, their companies will come to me and say, "We've got someone really talented. Um, they're probably just not confident enough. So you help them specifically with, you know, board meetings, yeah, leading their team." I do a lot around sort of leadership. And what's brilliant is I can see, because I'm an operator at heart still, I like to see
Yes.
tangible results and benefits, and
Yeah.
I do like to put
Yeah.
cash if I can on the benefit. And so I
Yeah.
go, "We
Yeah.
saved 100,000 by that thing we talked about," and we did. I'm like, brilliant. But always, sometimes it is, you know, it can be negotiations on salary, moving job. I help them in negotiate their value and their pay because we underestimate it every time, and we hardly ever ask for more money. So I'm teaching women
No.
to do that. But sometimes it is just that they're less tangible. There isn't a number, but it's when someone writes you and says that you changed my life in terms of the work we did together, or I was able to walk into a room, I was able to say no,
Yeah.
and they valued
Yeah.
themselves, type
Yeah.
thing. That equally brings me, you know, just as much joy in terms of doing that. And those, again, those little small changes make a huge difference to people.
Yeah. And so it. Yeah. So I mean, it sounds very much like obviously you're very. I mean, 'cause you mentioned it beforehand. There were organisations that didn't align to your values. Do you think that that's changed? Well, not changed over time, or not your values changed over time, but your reluctance to work with in environments where your values don't align.
Yeah, I don't work with everybody that want, you know, that uh, approaches me. I might know about that business. I might have an interaction at the time that doesn't feel right. I've had business I've started to work with, and then I've concluded that piece of work and not done another piece of work,
Yeah, yeah,
type thing. So the
yeah,
great thing now is it's my choice who I work with,
yeah. And
and
it
that's
sounds
a privilege.
And it sounds absolutely like it. I mean, because obviously listening to your story and where you started that as a 4-year-old in those pubs, which are all driven by community and this belonging and service, that actually you've gone full circle. Because really, what you're doing now is the same thing, really, isn't it? It's creating these spaces for people who share values or share, common experience to belong, and to be part of that, and you've been able to serve that community.
I would say of the work I do now, that's probably the biggest feature of people aren't used to being in safe spaces where they can truly speak up, and actually they don't get to know each other well enough. So one of the pieces of work I do that gets the most feedback on, and I tend to run programs, not one-off events, because change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and it
Yeah.
takes help, and it takes, you know, learning and trying and testing, and so a lot of the work I do is over maybe 3 or 6 or 12 months with people and businesses. And I do an exercise, a timeline exercise of birth to now, and I just get everyone to stop. Just stop,
Yeah.
listen to each other, learn, ask questions. And of all the work at that, they always say, "God, we didn't know. We've worked with them for 20 years. we didn't know that when they came for the job here 15 years ago, they didn't have any money and they walked for the interview. And then when they got there, they'd given them the wrong date for the interview and they had to come back another time and they didn't have the bus fare to get home. Like these personal stories about how people have ended up where they are now. And they help people to look at each other very differently in the workplace.
Yeah.
And we just don't stop enough and really get to. So I'm, you could say nosy, or curious. I'm really interested in people because then it helps me understand why they are the way they are today and why they might respond to something in a way that I might not understand, and it might not be my response. So it gives everyone a much better understanding of each other and creates a lot more safety from having that knowledge. And I do that on programs where people don't know each other. So they all have to come into a room and don't know each other. And actually, people share more when they don't know. It's amazing each other. And they go, oh
Yeah.
my God, I can't believe I've just said that. But when it's executive teams or smaller groups of teams working together, it's the thing that of everything I do that really starts the beginning of the journey off really, really well. And it's such a privilege to hear and have the trust of that of people.
Absolutely. And it's just amazing to hear that, because that's the essence of what, the basis of what any good relationship is, isn't it? That those emotional connections, so that you can understand somebody else, but you do that through storytelling. And what people tend to do, particularly, when you're just trying to quickly communicate, is to only show the good bits. And actually, like you've already discussed, as part of this conversation, but we all experience those, really deep, dark times. We all experience them, and yet we don't share them with other people, and yet those are the things that are actually defining us, and we're not telling those stories. So those opportunities to, well, and what you're doing is creating these spaces where people can, and they're encouraged to. It creates those emotional connections, which are, as I say, the basis of all the best relationships that exist, for anybody, and that sense of belonging.
Yeah, actually, I do. Again, I'll focus on women again. I'm so often blown away by what women have overcome. I have a friend who's had 7 rounds of IVF and lost every baby and kept a job down through that whole time, but didn't really share with her employers fully what was going on. And you just think, actually, if they knew your resilience and how you applied yourself, a bit like the time I had, but my business were amazing when I lost, my baby. They were so supportive. And actually, I was glad to have a job to go back to and distract myself with. And they gave me a massive project to do to keep me occupied. And it was exactly what I needed. So they knew me well enough to know sort of what to do. But the amount of women that have had, really dreadful, and I think I found myself very depressed last year with all the headlines of rape cases and even the DNI stuff that's going on now. And I had a choice of, do I get depressed or do I turn that into something positive? And actually saying, well, the good news is we're hearing about these things now. Women are becoming braver to speak up, so you can reframe your thinking
Yeah.
to go, so what do I do?
Yeah.
What can we do with that's positive and helpful? But I think if more people did share the adversity they faced and really how they overcome, I think people would genuinely look at them differently and realise we are much more capable and strong as humans than and it would show up better at work and probably at
Yeah.
home too, and be beneficial to
Yeah.
everybody. Actually, the whole ecosystem would benefit from that, really.
No, absolutely. And work on that piece of the comparison, isn't it? Because you sort of always look at other people and say, oh, they're doing so well. Look at me, look at them, and I'm not. But actually it's the context for all of that everyone's missing the context, because we don't share it as much as we should.
It's a bit like social media, isn't it? There's an image, presented. But so often, I run lots of women's groups. I've got a thriving group I started off because I needed to lose a few pounds. And I knew if I didn't have anyone accountable with me on the journey, I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's working. And I did one in lockdown. And when they all hear the stories from each other and they go, oh, it's not just me.
Yeah, yeah,
No, you're not
yeah,
alone. Other people feel
yeah.
this way. And they go, but we've seen you and we've heard you speak at events and we thought you were this
You,
perfect,
well,
amazing,
you had it all
successful.
together, yeah.
Not really, not underneath.
No,
That's my work face or what have you. We're quite surprised just how vulnerable and all the experiences, and we build up a picture that's not true.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
not of
absolutely.
service to us then.
Yeah, yeah, and that, yeah, absolutely amazing. So with your experience, right from a very early age right to now, working with in the hospitality and with the hospitality industry, what do you think is the biggest change that you've experienced in the industry over the years?
I would say from a hospitality perspective, probably the saddest thing has been the amount of pubs we've lost, because that heart and community I know it's still out there, but there's less of them. And if we look at them post COVID and people don't want to go out, and I look at our young people now, there would have been a point where the first pint that was bought, particularly for a young man, would have been his dad would have taken him to the pub.
Yeah,
And I just think the saddest thing when I look at the sector as a whole is we've lost a lot of that because we've lost the number of pubs, because the bigger pubs that are, very focused on food, they're not like that. So I think that's very sad in terms of community. But on a positive, what I see that we don't talk about enough in hospitality is, I think it's one of the sectors people can come in at bar and work to boardroom. You don't need a
yeah,
degree. You do need a lot of people skills to be good at that. And there's so many of the larger pubcos, particularly with their apprenticeship schemes, and I just don't really think people, and probably parents and younger people, see us as a career prospect. And I just think there's probably nowhere better that you could, it's big enough to progress and have all the different steps of there. But I do think people need a sense of their own belief to do it,
yeah,
and sort of grasp the opportunities and have the confidence. And for me, that's the magic. If you have an environment, spotting talent, succession planning, but you can give them the skills to believe in themselves and their
yeah.
self-worth and value, and an ecosystem where you can have a family, because it is different for women, whichever way or whoever
No,
has the child, it affects them differently, type
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
if you can look at people without seeing that as a negative, and see that again is still someone who's dedicated and talented, if you feel that way and you've got an environment around you of a company, that's where the magic happens, and we can see all the progression. So sadness and opportunity for hospitality, I can see.
Absolutely fantastic. So Jackie, I honestly could talk to you forever, because there's so much. I just want to, yeah, just keep chatting, but I have to bring it to an end, unfortunately. But if anybody wants to get in touch, is LinkedIn the best place to get hold of you?
Yeah, I'm LinkedIn, frequent flyer on LinkedIn, so they can catch me. And there's not many Jackie Moody McNamaras, so they probably won't find it very hard to find me. And then my Be Brilliant, again, Jackie Moody McNamara. If they look for that, they'll find my sort of website, and they can find me on there if they'd like to chat to me about anything, which would be super. And lovely to hear some of your story, Cassie, too. And obviously you're very experienced in hospitality, and are a lover of hospitality too, so it's nice to spend some time with you.
Thank you so much. I mean, as you can tell, I love these conversations because I get to talk to hospitality, to people who are equally as passionate about it as I am, and it is an absolute privilege and pleasure. So thank you so much for your time, Jackie. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully I'll see you again, maybe for a beer or something, so that'd be nice. Take care.
Absolutely lovely, definitely.